In Tanzania, in the lower region of the Kakombe Valley, there is the Gombe Stream National Park, where Dr. Jane Goodall founded a research center that focused heavily on primates, giving them proper welfare, research, and care. And in 1974, Jane and her team would witness something very interesting that reminded her and everyone about how primates and humans are so similar. War. Over 4 years, there was a war between two groups of monkeys that resulted in blood, death, and a test of loyalty between the Kazakila group and the Kahama group, all over the death of a senior male, which resulted in Humphrey, the new alpha male of the Kazakila group, taking over. But he had competition, and this turned these two factions into fighting over their own territory. These chimps found themselves choosing either the southern faction or the northern faction, which just resulted in this 4-year war and even caused generational trauma, literally. After Jane would write about this and share about this, people would actually accuse her of feeding the chimps food that was making them more aggressive or that she was antagonizing them. But as more and more research would go on, war is something that is very common among chimps. And today, we're going to be talking about the Gombe massacre in 1974. But first, let me introduce you to the podcast, The Decomposing Flower. If you're new here, we just kind of talk about things that are true crime adjacent or anything that we really find interesting. Today, I have with me Kira.
Hi. I've never said hi before on the intros, but today's the day.
So today there will be themes of monkeys being vicious and killing each other. So if any of that is maybe you don't want to hear about that, I totally understand.
I don't know if you knew this about me, but I actually, you know what? I love all of creatures on the earth, but monkeys terrify me.
Yeah, I think they're really interesting, but they terrify me because there's just something about them that I don't know if it's the human like aspect of them or what, but sometimes they kind of scare me.
I mean, yeah, when I was in Costa Rica, there was a bunch of like spider monkeys
Oh, yeah.
where they would just like look at you and be so human and stuff. And maybe that's the most terrifying part is just how human they are.
I know, right? Well, there's so many funny videos I see. There was a video where this monkey and it just like took his jacket and put it on. I think that's just so funny, but also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, because it knows exactly what that jacket is and it's like trying to look
Yeah,
spiffy.
and it's like walking around with the little jacket. I'm like, that's kind of cute. Anyways, all of our information is found online, but if we say anything wrong or we leave something out, feel free to let us know in the comments. If you have an episode or a case or a topic that you would like us to discuss, you can also drop it in the comments, or we also have a Google form. But with that, let's kind of talk about what happened. So, Jane Goodall was best known for her research among wild chimpanzees in Tanzania, and she actually was really heavy into advocating for human rights and animal welfare. She kind of wanted to create a world where both chimps and humans could kind of coexist. And it's really sad to know that she actually recently passed away in late 2025. So that is so sad. Honestly, I love her work.
She really lived how she lived, you know? Because there's some people who are like, "Yeah, save the turtles." And they're there with their, like, Starbucks plastic straws in the next shot, but, like, Jane seemed like one of the good ones.
Yeah, she really like truly cared about what she was doing and wasn't just in it for money. She actually cared. And so today we're going to talk about what Jane and her team would discover during this 4-year war that literally happened among monkeys. So before 1974, the Kazakila group was very large group that kind of kept to themselves. They rarely had beef with each other. And in 1971, Jane actually noticed that the group was starting to slowly not socialize with each other as much, and they were starting to kind of split off into two. So typically they were living in their own little territories, but this group kind of split into two. So it was either the northern faction and the southern faction. And these two factions, they kind of kept to themselves and they wouldn't even dare go near each other. They kind of kept this truce where they were like, you do you, I do me, and we won't be around each other. But there were a little bit of some raids that would go on. There were some monkeys that patrolled the area, making sure they were not going near each other. But for the most part, they weren't really causing that much commotion, it seemed. But it wasn't until an alpha senior male of the Kazakila group had died, which had made Humphrey the new alpha male. But he had a lot of competition from the Kahama group, which was ran by these two brothers named Hugh and Charlie. And this is kind of when the war started. A lot of chimps were starting to align themselves with either the Kahama group or the Kazakila group, and this meant war. So the Kahama group was actually best known to be quite fearless, according to Jane, and there was actually a few truce among some of the chimps. They had peaceful contracts that were made between two older males named Mike and Rodolph and a southern male named Goliath. Can I just pause and say I freaking am obsessed with these names of these monkeys? They literally had a monkey named Satan. I just think
My God, you know he got up to some wild things.
yeah, like some of these monkey names are just so funny. They literally had a monkey named Willy Wally. I think that it's so cute. I don't know. I
I also love you telling the story like a drama too, like being like, so anyways, Humphrey died, and so these two brothers, Bing Bang and Ching Chong, sorry, I don't know their names.
no, it's the two brothers are Hugh and Charlie. I'm obsessed with the names of these monkeys. We got Fegan, we got Satan, we got Sherry, we got Everett, Rodolph, Jomeo, Mike, Humphrey, and Gigi. Then we also have Goaty, D, Goliath, Young Sniff, Willy Wally. He actually had polio too, which is really sad. I did not know monkeys could get polio. And then we had an elder, or not we, because these are not my monkeys. They also had an elder female named Madame B. I love these names. I'm just obsessed with the names of these monkeys. So the very first bloodshed would happen in January 7th of 1974 when Goaty was minding his business. He was just literally eating a banana in a tree, doing whatever monkeys do in a tree, when 6 monkeys from the Kazakila group just came in and just completely obliterated him. They just started beating the shit out of Goaty. And they even had like this female chimp named Gigi. She was running around hooting and hollering while this was happening. She was kind of like their little cheerleader. I don't really know why. I don't study monkeys. I don't know if this was her way of kind of hyping them up or if she was trying to intimidate Goaty or what. But as she was doing that, the other monkeys were legitimately beating Goaty. And then after he stopped moving, they just did their little war cry and then ran off. Now, Goaty did manage to survive this, but only for a few days, and then he would eventually pass from his injuries. After they killed Goaty, they would then go and find D and also kill him as well. Or she. I actually do not know the monkey's gender. And then after that, they went and found Goliath, who was an elder male from the Kahama group. He actually had been quite friendly and had a few truce among some of the others in the Kazakila group, but his kindness didn't last or take him anywhere, and they would end up ambushing him and killing him. Now, when the researchers were watching this, they were shocked by this brutality of these chimps because they were literally watching Fabian, who was the leader, legitimately twist Goliath's leg as if they were trying to like twist it and tear it off. And
Oh.
yeah, it was so brutal that the researchers were like, oh my God, like I can imagine these researchers had seen some brutality, but this was like a lot harsher than what they were used to. And they were like, holy shit, what is going on here? It was just gruesome. And of course, Goliath also didn't make it. At this point, the Kazakila group had killed off Goaty, D, and Goliath. Hugh was another monkey, and he ended up disappearing, and they actually have no idea what happened to him. There were a few monkeys that did just disappear, and no one saw the death. Now, there was a leopard in the area, so that could have been maybe the cause for this, but sometimes monkeys just, they just disappear and they just do their thing, or maybe they ended up dying. So all that was left was Charlie, Young Sniff, Madame B, and Willy Wally. So, a group of fishermen actually had heard the sounds of monkeys literally brawling in the night. They would hear the sounds of them just roar. And then they eventually found the body of Charlie in the Kahama stream. After Charlie's death, Willy Wally also disappeared and his death also was never witnessed. And eventually, Madame B, who was the elderly female, was also ambushed and she didn't die immediately, but she did last only for a couple days before she died. So the only one that survived up until this point was young Sniff, who was very young, hence his name. He managed to actually survive for a year, and a lot of the researchers assumed that he would be welcomed into the Kazakila group. Typically in the wild, females will be more likely to be welcomed into a group because they got a mate. And sometimes young males aren't always welcomed, but they can be if they seem like they'll be valuable to the group. But it seems that for young Sniff, he managed to last for a year and then he ended up dying. I don't know if the monkeys took a year break and were resting up, or if young Sniff managed to hide or what he was doing, but unfortunately he only lasted a year. So another thing that's legitimately crazy is some of the female monkeys were legitimately being beaten and kidnapped and taken hostage to the other group of monkeys. Even the female monkeys cannot escape misogyny and the brutality of males. So some of the females were legitimately kidnapped and then taken for mating purposes. And there had been a few females that were killed, some that were just taken away. So, with the Kahama group now completely gone, the Kazakila group would take over their new territory, which increased from 12 square kilometers to 15 square kilometers. So, because of this win, I think they got a little cocky and they decided they wanted to expand their territory and they were starting to go into the other areas and they had two other groups to be kind of weary of. They had the Kalonde group and the Mitumba group that they had to fight against. This actually resulted in more war and more bloodshed, and they eventually lost Humphrey and Sherry, which had them kind of back off and be like, okay, we're not gonna fight against these guys, we're gonna leave them alone. And eventually they were actually bullied into their territory going super small. So it went to about 5 square kilometers, which was a lot smaller than what they originally had. And this made it really hard for them to eat. So after the war, around 1982, the Kolande and the Umba, I do not know if I'm saying these words right, they ended up invading the Kazakila group. And they were a lot stronger and they outnumbered the Kazakila group. But the Kazakila group, during this time, they had a lot of males that were being born and they had a lot of young males that were just loud, which actually intimidated a lot of the other groups of monkeys to the point that they literally were like, you know what? Okay, we hear you. You guys are loud. And they just left. And the Kazakila group was able to regain some of their territory back. And eventually the hostility did die. So, according to Brian Ferguson, who is an anthropologist, he believed this war contributed to a lot of transgenerational violence, which is literally generational trauma. Because of this, they saw a lot of young males being born during the war, or if they were very young during the war, they started to become very aggressive. And there was this monkey named Frodo, again, obsessed with the name. He became very aggressive. He had actually watched and witnessed multiple violent deaths and beatings of other males. And he even witnessed the brutal death of an alpha named Goblin. Again, I freaking just love these names. I'm sorry. I just love the names.
I just love how they're consistently, yeah, so Frodo, he just watched Goblin die in front of his eyes.
I know. I'm obsessed with the names of them. I don't know what it is. Whenever an animal has a name that's so normal, I love it. I love when I see someone's cat that's just named Richard. I'm like, I love that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I have a friend whose cat is named Michael. Okay, Michael.
I love that, Michael. So Frodo did actually watch a lot of murder happened, and some of the like, there was cannibalism that had happened apparently. Some of the monkeys, they would kill each other, then eat the other monkey. There were a lot of infants being murdered by their own mothers, which just I think from seeing a lot of the aggressive behavior really had Frodo become aggressive where he would go on and cause a lot of violence himself. So after this war and Jane had written about this, she would say that this was really upsetting to her, obviously. She had actually witnessed some of these murders happening and they were very violent and brutal. And she said she would wake up and have nightmares from these. And I can imagine, like, some of these monkeys she probably really befriended. I know to a degree, of course, but I just can't imagine you have a monkey, you're studying these monkeys, and then you just watch one of them completely get murdered, or you watch another murder another. That'd be so crazy. So, after she shared what had happened about this, a lot of people started to blame Jane. They accused her of feeding the monkeys that had a lot of tendencies to make them aggressive or that she was provoking the chimps because for a long time, people assumed chimpanzees were fairly neutral and kind of kept to themselves and were only aggressive when they needed to be. But as more research has gone on, it's actually pretty common for chimps to have war. They just fight a lot, they're just more aggressive. I mean, there's so many cases of people having chimps and they end up killing them. I mean, you should never have a chimpanzee or any wild animal as just a pet, but it's just pretty common for chimps to have war sometimes if they feel threatened by their power or where they stand, or if there is a lack of females, they also get pretty aggressive. I don't know if that's because maybe these monkeys need to mate. Sometimes, if there's too many females and there's too many babies, this can make males get annoyed and more aggressive. I'm assuming because competition. But we can't really put our human empathy and our morals onto monkeys. They're not us. A lot of times they're doing this for survival, but it's so interesting to see how monkeys are just like humans with war. Although I would argue our war is more vile because most times we're just doing it for money, and monkeys seem to be doing it more for survival. And so I do want to end this episode with a little snippet of a poem that had been written based off this war. And it said, "Still, I don't understand. Were these chimps so human, or are we such animals?" And I will leave you guys with that. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.